You're listening to Don't IEP Alone with special education advocate Lisa Lightner. For more information about Lisa, the IEP Toolkit, and more ways we can help you in your process, go to adayinourshoes.com. Now back to the show with your host, Lisa.
Hello and good morning. Lisa Lightner here with another episode of Don't IEP Alone. And today I am going to talk about Autism Month and actually not a whole lot about IEPs, which we're going to get into in a minute. Let's see. It's April, so happy April. We are finally getting some mild weather here, which I'm very excited about. It was in the 40s and raining for what feels like the past 2 months, and now we have sunshine and 70s, and I am just really feeling the difference. So I hope you are too. I know that many of you had been hit with some pretty bad storms the past couple of days, so keeping you all in my thoughts if that's affected you. And I hope that, you had a chance to go out and look at the sky the other day and see the eclipse. We only had partial coverage here, but it was still pretty cool. So no slideshow today, no anything. And I really hate these glasses that I'm wearing, but I can't see without them. And I don't like the red frames. They're from the Dollar Tree, but I've been really scratching up my real ones. So I'm wearing these because I don't really have any others. So that's why I look like a dork, or like Sally Jesse Raphael, which I'm probably dating myself by using that reference, but that's who I feel I look like. But anyway, so if you follow me on Facebook, and my Facebook page, the backslash for the page address is A Day in Our Shoes IEP. I had to add that IEP on the end because by the time I tried to grab A Day in Our Shoes, it was gone. They never even used that moniker and won't respond to my email. But anyway, that's another story for another day. But anyway, we've been having some discussions this whole month because I've been talking a lot about Autism Awareness Month and been talking a lot about my journey, right? Let's be clear on this. I'm talking about my journey and my family, and talking about what my family needs and what my family feels and what my family believes. That may not be the same for your family. It may not be the same for you, your child. And that's okay. We're all different here. But I'm an advocate. I have been for 15 years, and I'm very outspoken. It's something that is just absolutely born in me. It's just comes very naturally to me. I have an old newspaper clipping, a newspaper article. Like, I was writing letters to the editor about societal issues when I was in high school and college. It just came very natural. It just comes very naturally to me. I love public speaking. I love persuasive speaking and persuasive writing. And again, when I'm passionate about something, I'm very outspoken about it. And one of the things that I am extremely passionate about is my son. I love him to death. I talk about him quite a bit on my site and on my podcast. His name's Kevin. He's almost an adult. He'll be an adult this summer. And so first of all, he was diagnosed as an infant, which I've said many times. So we've been on this journey a long time. He's been receiving services since he's 6 months old. That's when I was kind of thrown into this and had to figure out IEPs, or, that was IFSP at the time, and figure out medical services and Medicaid and insurance and supports and interventions and all that from a very young age. At the same time, he also has a distinct chromosome abnormality, which a few thousand people on the planet have. The community associated with that is pretty close-knit. And of course, social media and email and the internet allow us to be close-knit. And I have to be very, very careful and very intentional with my wording here. I would never, ever put like fences around my kid and say, well, these are your limits, and this is only as far as you can go. You can't go past this fence, right? There are always going to be kids who are at one complete end of that disorder, and some who are at the other end. But the thing I knew was that as we sit here in 2024, and then even as we sat in 2006 and 2007, we knew that, for example, no adult with his condition was living independently. There was not a single adult who lived on their own. Okay. So again, sure, my kid could be that exception to the rule and he could be the first one, but that's also a decent sized data set with which to work, right? So, that's just one example of kind of like how I approach things, and that I don't limit him. I let him do what he wants and what he's capable of doing, and I'm always pushing him to do more. For example, he has run in running races many times. And to my knowledge, no other kid with his condition has done that. He's done a lot of really cool things in his short life so far. But at the same time, I do have a decent data set to kind of look at and say, well, what are those kids doing? What are those adults doing? What's their life expectancy? What kind of supports are they using as an adult, and so on. And sure, there are some who are living at home but going to community college. Okay, there are different levels here. So, but we also knew that I'm almost certain that near 100% of the kids with his chromosome condition have autism. So we knew that was coming, most certainly. And in fact, like looking back now, the signs were there from a very, very early age. I'm completely certain, like he does this stim thing with his leg and his arm sometimes. And looking back now, like I am certain that he was doing that when I was pregnant with him, when he was in the womb. I'm certain that he was doing that now. I'm like, oh, at the time I didn't really get it because I was, he's my first. But now I'm like, yeah, you were stimming back then too. And he definitely was stimming as a newborn with certain behaviors. So his autism is significant. And having a child with autism, like many parents, you read all you can, right? And I've been kind of all over the place early on. Now, keep in mind that, and I've written about this on my site, my son was diagnosed prior to Jenny McCarthy writing her book and being very outspoken about her child. So I get accused of that a lot, and not as much anymore, but back then I did. And they'd be like, oh, well, you're listening to Jenny McCarthy. And no, I didn't. I honestly had formed a lot of this on my own based on other things online. Because again, she hadn't written her book yet. She hadn't been on Oprah when I already had these opinions. But I listen, I learn. I have learned from another group of friends, not related necessarily to the disability community, but I've listened to them about their guidance as far as intentional listening and amplifying voices and really kind of checking your personal biases, which we all have. And I didn't really begin to understand that till about 5 or 6 years ago, about what it really means to take a deep breath and ask yourself, why do I feel this way? What have I been socialized to think and feel about this? And is that accurate in this day and age? Or do I know more now than I did when I first formed that opinion? And while it's tiring at times, and I don't mean to get on my high pedestal and be like, oh, I'm so morally superior to you because I intentionally think, no, I don't do it all the time. But when it comes to a lot of personal issues, like, yes, I do a lot of thinking about them and examining my personal biases, driving in the car, walking my dog, stuff like that, when you're just kind of thinking and reviewing in your head things that happened. So where I've gone as far as thinking about autism, early on, it was kind of all over the map. And then several years ago, this movement, and this is a movement, and again, remember that when I'm speaking about groups, I don't mean everything. I don't mean everything, everyone, all the time. I'm talking about colloquialism. I can't say the word. Colloquialisms. Like when I say, oh, everyone does this. Like, no, I don't mean everyone on the planet, all 8 billion people. I mean like a lot, or a group, or some people, right? Like I'm not talking about everyone all the time. And I'm only saying that so that you can not email me and go, oh, well, I don't do that. Right. I know that not everyone on the planet does this. However, several years ago, I started to listen to the quote unquote, the hashtag actually autistic community. And I was following their pages. I was following their blogs. I was reading their websites. I'm reading their Tumblrs, following them on Twitter and on Instagram, and just kind of like listening to those voices, thinking, okay, I have a child with autism. And I need to listen to these folks, right? And I have hosted a lot of their content on my site. There are many articles on my site written by actually autistics. I've had folks on my podcast and so on. So I've listened and listened and listened. And I think that there's a lot of value in listening to people who have a condition. But as my thinking evolves more, and as I get older, and as I observe more, listen more, there is a segment. And again, you don't need to email me and say, well, I'm not doing that, because I know not everybody is. However, there is a significant, outspoken, vocal, and loud segment of that population whose advocacy efforts are actually harming my child. And so here's where I'm at, and here's where these kind of conversations are coming up on my Facebook page and elsewhere. If you can run a blog, a Twitter account, a Facebook page, if you can email someone, if you can find a legislator, email them with your concerns, join an advocacy group, and be heard about this issue that is important to you. If you can do any of those things, then your functioning level is not that of my son's. And I make a lot of people uncomfortable because I've used the words lower functioning, severe autism, profound autism, and so on. He does have autism that interferes with his day-to-day activities. His stimming, his sensory seeking, a lot of it he's not safe. He's just not safe. He's again, he's going to be an adult this year, and he's never been left alone. Not even for one moment of his life has he been left by himself. He's never had, imagine that, your whole life you've never been alone because it's not safe. And what has happened, and this is where I get misunderstood, there was a big movement because people go, oh, what do you mean that these folks are taking away your kids' choices? What do you mean? We're advocating for what autistics need, and only autistic voices should be heard. And what do you mean they're taking away your kids' choices? And so these are a few of the things that get to me. This whole piece of you should only listen to autistic people when it comes to autistic issues. I don't know what else to tell you other than to say parents like me, whose kids do not have a voice, who are not able to express themselves to strangers, who are not able to get out there and do some political advocacy and lobbying for policy change. If you don't include parents in that conversation, and if you continually shout us down and say that our voice doesn't matter, we're never, ever going to come to agreement on that. I don't know how else to put it. I'm never going to think that that's okay, that only your voice matters and that mine doesn't, as a stakeholder in this, who has to coordinate and arrange and plan for lifelong care for their child. There's just no other way to say it. We're never going to come to agreement on that, and here's why. So, obviously, institutionalization in this country has a long and terrible history. There's no denying that. Parents like me are not calling for a return to Pennhurst. We're not calling for a return to Willowbrook or a return to institutionalization. But over the past 5 to 10 years, as these actually autistic and self-advocates have advocated, they have said things and they have tweeted things like there's no such thing as severe autism. There's no such thing as a lower functioning individual. It's only different needs. It's just a different way of going through life. And many of them are arguing that autism, by definition, isn't really a disorder. It's just a condition. It's just a different way of living. And that we shouldn't, it shouldn't be a medical condition at all. What that has resulted in here in Pennsylvania, and I can only speak to my state, I can't speak to the others, is that the Department of Health and Human Services has determined that for adult living situations, if you are a disabled adult and you are receiving government supports to pay for your living as a disabled adult in Pennsylvania, if you are being supported by the state, which is, something families like mine are looking toward, that is probably my son's future. But if you are in that situation where the government is paying for you to quote unquote live and exist, that you cannot live more than 4 adults to any one setting. And so this is what happened. So I have this friend who lives near me, lives in my county. Her daughter is almost 30. She might even be 30 now. But anyway, before this change happened, she was living in like a campus type setting. And everybody had their own little like efficiency or studio apartment. And it was living with supports. Like they left, they didn't cook for themselves and all that. Like you could have like a dorm fridge and stuff like that. But you went to a dining place for your meals, and you had this little studio efficiency. And she could walk from like apartment to apartment. It was almost like a dorm kind of setting. And now someone would go, oh, that's an institution. But she could visit from room to room, much like a college kid did, right? Like that's what I did when I was in college. You went from room to room and you visited with your friends and you made friends and you watched TV and you gossiped and you did all those things. And this particular young woman has an intellectual disability, but that's what she did. State said, nope, you can't do that anymore. That's more than 4 people. We're shutting this place down. And they shut it down and they sent her back home. So she instantly lost the only community that she knew as an adult. She instantly became miserable because she no longer had a social life. She started to gain a significant amount of weight to the point where it became unhealthy. And this was all because, again, some self-advocacy efforts said, nope, no more than 4. I know of other...
We'll be back after a quick break.
We interrupt this podcast to bring you a truth bomb. The IEP process never gets easier. You get better. If you do not learn the IEP process and how to use it to your advantage, your child will get left behind. That's exactly why I created the Don't IEP Alone series of advocacy courses for parents. Join us and gain the knowledge, skills, and support you need to navigate the complex world of special education and IEPs. Visit adayinourshoes.org for more information.
Another young man who was in a similar situation. He was in a large group setting, very happy, enjoyed hanging out with his peers during the day and enjoyed the routine. And, HHS said, nope, no more than 4. You have to go home and live in your community, because this is what they fought for, right? Community inclusion, that autistic people deserve to live in their community. And yes, they do deserve to live in their community, but you also deserve to live, you also get to decide what is your community. So anyway, they sent this young man home. He's living at home now. He's miserable. He has a one-on-one direct service provider. They call them DSPs here in this state anyway. I don't know what they call them where you are. And forced to live in his community. So then here's what's happening with these folks is you're quote unquote forced to live in your community. But it may not be your community, but that's not for you to decide anymore. We've now decided it's kind of like I guess I could liken it to forcing everyone in gen ed, right? Nope, everyone has to go to gen ed now because you have to be included. But the supports and services aren't there to make gen ed appropriate for every child. So, but you're forced to live in your community, and instead of living in a group setting, they're getting one-on-one care around the clock because a lot of these folks aren't safe on their own for even a moment. So it's become infinitely more expensive. Not that cost should be the first consideration, but if we're doing something that's making people unhappy and it costs 3 to 5 times as much, I don't understand the logic. So they get these direct care professionals and they pick them up during the day. And I know there's one guy in my neighborhood who lives down the street from me, and his people, they take him to the park and they take him to Walmart, and everybody tells me all the time, oh yeah, I saw him in Walmart. Who wants to go to Walmart every day, right? My friend's daughter goes to Legoland in Plymouth Meeting once a week. Now, look, that's great. I'm not shaming any adult who enjoys Legos and going to Legoland, but it's not necessarily what this 30-year-old woman wants to do. And there are just so few options. The young man who I know who got sent home, whose mom I met last summer, her son was being picked up and by his care people and going out with a small group, and they were going to the mall all the time and walking around the mall. He didn't want to go to the mall, right? You're forcing him to live in a community situation that he doesn't want. And that just because there are no other options, there are no day programs, there are no other things. So he hated that. And so one day he kicked out the van window because that was his way of saying like, hey, I don't like this, right? All communication tells you something. And that was his communication. And then he got removed from that program. So now they really have no options because he's just sent home. So this is what I'm talking about when I say that some self-advocates have taken away my choices. There used to be a really cool farm around here, and I had often looked forward to putting Kevin's name on that wait list because it's not far from here, and it was 10 men living on a sunflower farm. And so that's too many. It can't be 10. It can only be 4. And they said, well, sure. So great. So take that farmhouse, and why can't you just make it for 4 people instead of 10? Like, why does it have to be 10? Like, why can't it be 4? Because the state doesn't pay enough money to, you need that. And again, this is where I get shouted down. Like, well, now you're talking about institutionalization and doing it for cheaper. And like, no, I'm not calling for a return to institutionalization. I don't know where my line in the sand is, but it's more than 4 and it has to be affordable. So either the state has to come up with more money because they've taken away these choices, but they haven't funded appropriately for the changes that must take place to make this happen. But, it's got to change because I don't know where my number is. It's somewhere between 4 and, 50. I don't know. I don't know what, is it 4? Is it 10? Maybe. I don't know. In college, I lived in a house with 14 or 15 other girls. Like, it was a big old house, and I think there was at least 14 of us in there. Like, that was my choice. Like, why is it I can choose to live in a home with 14 girls, but my son couldn't? Because he's disabled? Like, that doesn't make sense. The other piece is that these things that we've gone round and round as a society with, whether or not to use the term special needs. And then there was people first language. And then it was, no, it's identity first language. And then we just want to be called autistic and all that. All these things that some advocates have advocated for, and that is their adult living choices, what you call them, their language, all that. They're trying to shout me down and deny my family those same choices, right? Like, why don't we get to choose what kind of living arrangements Kevin just loves to be in small groups of people. I don't know if 4 will be enough. I guess we're going to have to find out. But he loves to be in small group settings, like observing people, watching them, and stuff like that. And I'm sad that he's probably not going to get that he's going to live here with us, and direct service people are going to come in round the clock and do who knows what with him, but that he's not going to have that peer group anymore because he's going to be quote unquote forced to live in his community. So that's what I'm talking about. And then the whole thing of like, well, why do you have to say lower functioning? Why can't you say higher support needs or more support needs? Or like, because you know what? I'm just so fucking over it with this language nonsense. Like, we argue over light it up blue and you don't light it up blue anymore. And, oh, don't use the puzzle piece because I'm not a puzzle piece. And no, it's not red, it's gold. No, it's not red, it's not gold. It's the infinity symbol and the rainbow and no, it's not low functioning. It's higher support needs. Like, all this isn't getting us anywhere. It's not. So just stop. Just stop worrying about the semantics of it all and let's fix the problems that truly exist. Oh, but language matters and that's how you create change. No, sometimes, sure. But now we've just completely moved the goalposts into nobody's even focusing on outcomes anymore. And all everybody's just discussing is what we're going to call people, right? And it's getting to the point where over and over, and I've seen a huge increase in it this year, and maybe I'll post some links on my Facebook page or in these show notes if I have time. Groups that are trying to celebrate autism awareness, trying to acknowledge autism acceptance, and putting stuff out there. And the only thing that's happening in return is that they're getting shouted down and, you did it wrong, right? You did it wrong. You can't acknowledge autism that way. You have to do it this way. So anyway, that's I know that's really jumbled. That's really where I'm at with this. I hope, although I don't hope because I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. My wish is that the DSM would get revisited. It's only been about 10 years since the last one, and that's why I'm not hopeful that it's going to happen anytime soon. But the term autism has become so watered down that it's meaningless. And you can't just watch a couple of TikTok videos and take a BuzzFeed quiz and then decide that you're autistic and use the same term that applies to my son. And that's what some of these advocates are fighting for, the right to self-diagnose and the right to, they're like, well, we're just trying to, identify as a population. Like, use a different word then, because whether you like it or not, whether you agree with it or not, autism is currently a medical diagnosis and it has a DSM code attached to it. Whether you like it or not, our society lives and dies by those codes, right? It determines what kind of insurance you can get and what kind of supports and services and all that. It matters. Again, it doesn't, if you don't like that, too bad. Like, it's what is. Pick a different word, because right now, autism is a medical diagnosis. And when you watch a couple of TikTok videos and take a BuzzFeed quiz and decide that you're autistic, that really diminishes, first of all, it just diminishes everything that is important to so many families. And no, I'm not ever going to take you seriously. And I don't think a lot of people are. Call yourself neurodivergent or neurodiverse or something like that. But it's just become so watered down that we really do need maybe 2 diagnoses, 3. I know some places are going to level 1, level 2, level 3. I've even seen people shouted down over that, right? Oh, you're not supposed to use that. Like, why do you get to pick what you call yourself, but I don't for my child? Well, you're hurting his feelings. I know it bothers him because it bothered me as a kid. No, no, you're not in my house. You're not here. You don't know him. And so I'm not going to speak for you. As I started this with, I'm not speaking for anybody but my family and my situation. And this is kind of from where I sit. This is what I'm seeing. And my son is but he has lost options. And so, yeah, I'm going to keep fighting and keep pushing back to get those options reinstated. And if that angers some people along the way, I don't know what to tell you. I'm going to look out for my kid first. And you're going to have to advocate for yourself and your family. But anyway, I wanted to acknowledge all the parents who did reach out to me privately and said, I appreciate you saying this. I feel like we can't speak up anymore because we get shouted down. And I definitely hear you on that. And it's definitely a weird place to be, to have people disparaging me. And then they're sharing, like, I'm sharing pictures of my son with his permission. And I do that to remind people that there is a person behind all of this, right? It's really easy to get caught up in the rhetoric and the debate when you forget that there's a person here. So that's why I include pictures of him. But it's a really weird place to be when you know that people are sharing this and they're sharing it in private settings and disparaging me with pictures of my son. So please don't do that. Leave him out of it. And I guess that's it. I'll probably have more to say on this as April goes on. It's only early April, so maybe I will, maybe I won't. But pay attention to the page, and I'm sure you will see more to come. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you for listening to Don't IEP Alone with special education advocate Lisa Lightner. We're so glad you've joined us and would love to connect with you outside of the show. For more information about Lisa, the IEP Toolkit, and more ways we can help you in your process, go to adayinourshoes.com. From self-care tips to common IEP mistakes, there's even more to explore. Don't forget to rate and review the podcast and subscribe to never miss an episode. Until next time, don't IEP alone. And you don't have to.